Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I am SocioPsycho, and today we will be looking at Ironclad Tactics. This was created by a company called SocioPsycho. It is a lane defense game with cards as the troop spawning requirement, with a strategy and tactical mindset of what you'll be facing needed to tie into what cards you take. It is a combination of a couple different games, and we'll see exactly how well that actually ties itself together. Now first we're going to start in the options menu, and when you go to the options menu you do have some basic choices here. As you can see in the display mode, there's not really a huge choice in between what screen resolutions you do wish to have it at. I have been playing at 1920 by 1080, and I've not had any issues. Performance-wise, the game looks decent for what it is, as it is more of a top-down style game in a tactical set. I have had no crashes or tearings or clipping of any sort, and the game has been running at 60 frames per second with no issues or dropping in that category. Now you do have sound volume as well, which is really nice, as the music in the game helps propel the story forward and is done very well. The game takes precedence in a Civil War era of the United States, but with a twist of the robotic army integrated into it. Now when we'll start off talking about the story. As the story is very simplistic and it may not actually have voice acting integrated into it, it does relay the story in a comic book fashion. The art style of the game is done very well, and it's good enough to help propel you through the story. Tells you what you need to know in order for the story to tie together perfectly fine with the gameplay elements of the game. Now as you can see here, this is your basic interface at the beginning of the game. You have the different battle fronts which you will play upon as you progress through the story. As the story goes through, you'll unlock more cards and the difficulty will increase. The game is a difficult one to review because a lot of it comes down to personal opinion or preference. So there is a line to be drawn into, well, what does it offer versus, well, I don't like that. And what does it offer is very simplistic once you know where to look. So when we click on this one mission further back, the North Lawn, Washington, D.C., the story element of the game, you can see that your progression, or my progression on this mission, will relate to what cards you've unlocked. As each mission has a different battlefield layout, where you face different types of troops. As the game progresses forward, the difficulty increases and you need to change up the deck you have. You gain cards by completing the missions and doing so on a better and harder difficulty. So if you just win the story, you can see here you get some basic cards. If you complete the story challenge, you get more cards. There is a statue. If we look at the picture, you can see the statue in the middle of the battlefield. If you are able to defend that statue, you will unlock even more cards. It offers not only reward upon your willingness to strive to better your ability in that certain mission, but also as a replayability through the entire game, which is definitely nice to see. The interface of the basic selection of the map and the battles and the cards of what you have is done fine. There's no issue or real confusion in that regard. Now you do have a choice on certain missions of either playing the story or playing skirmish, and some will have a puzzle choice on them as well. Solve a puzzle using a fixed set of cards. What that pretty much means is that they have given you the cards to choose that you must complete the battle with instead of going in with your own deck. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the decks, because that's really the main importance before we get into the combat itself. When we click on the deck list options you have here, you can make a new deck or you can edit some of your decks. As you can see, it's really nice that you have the ability to duplicate your deck and then you can edit the copy. So let's just go into edit. Now this is where it kind of gets a little ugly. As a card game management style, it's a bit rough around the edges in how it looks. That doesn't mean that necessarily it's bad, but the organization of how it is pretty rough. It doesn't organize the cards by the point value of them, So you can simply see, oh, well, these are all my 2-cost cards, or these are my 3-cost cards. Now, yes, on the side, you do have filters. As you can see, you can filter out any parts you don't like, and that's always nice to have. So there's a give and take. Like I said in the beginning, it's a difficult game to review because they have options, and it comes down to personal preference and what you find acceptable or what you find distasteful. It may look slightly confusing, and I would like to see a better organizational category for the cards that you have available. If you're not aware of what cards you actually have, having it systemically better organized would have been nicer. Now, when you do cross over onto one of your cards, each card will have a help icon on it, and you can see it will bring up on the left side of the page there exactly what that card does, so you can understand even more about what the cards are, and that's really appreciative that it goes into that level of depth to help you build a deck which is meant to synergize well with each other. Now, the cards that you have the availability to hold, you can see right here. If I click and I have 21 out of 20, too many cards, it won't allow me to have that. So you need to make sure you have the maximum amount of cards allowed, and then from there, you can save your deck. It's simplistic in its understanding, but the more cards you get, the more difficult it may be to organize them if you don't know what you're looking for. Thus why having it by the amount they cost is preferred. The game has a co-op option heavily into it where you can play with, or against, I should say, friends or strangers in a skirmish mode style. But we're not going to go too much into that. We'll exit the deck list, and we'll load up on one of the more simplistic missions, because like I said, the missions themselves aren't all that complicated. So when we go in here, the base map layout of the game is very simplistic. What changes is the number of difficulty or types of troops that you end up facing in the battle. As you can see, your troops will come out from the left, and the enemy will come out from the right. As we look at the top corners of each of the screens, you can see the card count that you or the enemy has, the AP points, which is pretty much just the movement points, versus how much AP you'll get next turn. Now that in later games does change, as there are capturable objects in the game which will increase your AP structure, so you'll get more as you progress forward. The main point of this is to get your troops which have victory points tied to them, as you can see underneath our metallic creatures, the victory points that they have. When you gain 6 or 8 or 10, as the number does increase as the battle continues forward, you can see a baseline of, well, I need to get this many across in order to be successful. The cards that you take out through combat with you are the cards that you'll come across during your play. The deck that you take into battle will dramatically change the type of experience that you have in the battle. The game goes off of turns and turn bases, and it does come down to a randomizational element. The two parts of the game, which is a lane defense and a card game, place itself squarely on each other's shoulders. The fact that the randomization of the cards you take in mix with the speed of a lane defense game is really where a lot of the negativity from the game comes from. The fact that a lane defense is about getting out different types of troops and attacking your enemy as fast as you can or as rough as you can, and reacting to what the enemy is taking out, upgrading your troops in the standard lane defense, and overwhelming your enemy in some variation as the battle continues forward. With it relying on cards and AP, it scales back with time and the intensity of a lane defense game. And so you end up with a card style game where those who enjoy the card style mentality of games, where you need to create a deck and you don't mind the randomization aspect of what cards in your deck you'll actually get or when you'll get them, is really where the divide in this game comes from. Because there's such a luck element attached to the game as what the enemy will drop or what lane the enemy will go out on the battlefield, versus what cards you'll get, will you be able to react to a situation or not, it does tie into some replayability annoyances or variation. And that's why I said this is a game that is very hard to review because it does come down heavily to personal preference. Do you enjoy card games? And if you enjoy card games, then you're aware or willing to accept the randomization chance that you'll get the card you'll need or you won't. And if you're looking at this from a lane defense game, where you're hoping for a more fast-paced combat, well, that's not necessarily the case because of how the cards interact. Does the system of the game actually work for what it is trying to become? Yes, it does. The balance of the game in between the cards that you unlock, the enemies that you face, and the lanes of difficulty that increase or change up as you progress are or can be a challenge for different types of people. Where it comes down to is the expectations of it being one or the other. People will expect this game to be a card game where it is heavily placed on your cards affecting the enemy cards, where it's more of a combinational cards of what you place. You place down an Ironclad and then you place a weapon on that Ironclad. And then you have to heal the Ironclad. It has more of a combat intrinsic feel to it, rather than just playing down a card and letting the enemy combat against it. You need to be more aware of what's going on, and it ties into the strategy element of the game. You not only need to know what cards are important, but how they interact with each other, and a step beyond that, how to implement that into battle, as the battle has no pause. There is no real time to decide what your next move is. You must think as fast as you can and make the right decisions. People who play card games might not be used to an instant continuational battle in a real-time strategy management, and it could be really off-putting. Just as people who are looking forward to a high-paced combat iteration from a lane defense game would possibly be annoyed because it is scaled back due to the cards or randomizations of the cards. So at the end of the day, is the game fair? I would believe yes. The answer is definitely yes. The game is fair in the base intrinsic value of what it offers. But it's not one or the other. It doesn't say, hey, this is a card game, or hey, this is a lane defense game. It says this is a mixture of both, a hybrid, something that we have created which is neither of those two genres. And this will lead to many people being upset or distasteful of the game, while others will enjoy the unique value of it. And so this game is very difficult to review because while the base value of what it offers comes heavily down to chance or luck or variation of what your deck is versus the enemy. Yes, what card you may draw to place on the battlefield versus what enemy card they will place on the battlefield, and then what lane they will place that card on the battlefield. There's a lot of variation and chance drawn from the card element of a game, which can be very discouraging. Personally, myself, I found the game not to my preference. Not because of the mechanics of the game. The mechanics of the game for what it offers does exactly what it's meant to do, and it does so in a very fair and just way. Me personally, I don't enjoy overly spending too much time building a deck of cards, which will fall down to chance and randomization upon what I get versus what the enemy gets. So I did not enjoy the game as much as somebody else did. And while I personally did not enjoy the game, it doesn't mean that the value of the game is any less. It doesn't mean that the mechanics of the game work less. But you have to understand that what the game offers is a slower paced card chance style game. The story is basic and not something that is really going to drive you through if you don't enjoy some of the element or aspects of the game in the combat ratio. So can I recommend it? Yes, I can. But I strongly advise that the person who is thinking about buying this game do a evaluation upon themselves as to what they like or what concept they may like about the game. Because if you're not aware of what you actually enjoy or why you enjoy a style of game, Getting a game like this, which is a hybrid, will cause you to immediately distaste it. Thus why there's such a mixed review category of this. Yes, it's good. No, it's bad. Knowing what element of a game, and that the fact that it is not a pure lane defense game and more elements of a card aspect of a combat situation is tied into it, may be exactly what you're looking for, or it may be an exact deterrent for you to actually be able to enjoy. Can I recommend the game on the basis of what it does? Yes. For what it very basically does, it does right, and I never felt as if the game was unfair or cheap. It requires a level of skill and difficulty due to the randomization or card build deck capability of the player. So it's up really to you, the purchaser, to understand what they like about the potential genres of this game before making a purchase. I hope this review has been helpful, as there's not much to talk about, but it is a complicated purchase if you're not aware of what you enjoy. Thank you everybody for listening and watching, for I've been SocioPsycho, and I'll see you next time.